Welcome to the Overcut. Everything you thought you wanted to know about the most recent IndyCar race and probably a bunch of stuff you didn't even know was possible. I'm Kyle Benjamin. He's Chris DeHardy, sporting the Dallas Stars jersey today, repping the NHL playoffs. Chris, it's been a really kind of quiet week in IndyCar. Not much has happened really since the start of the season, and there's been zero controversy. Nothing interesting has happened. Oh, wait, hold on. On Monday, what was it, of this week, Zach Brown told Roger Penske, hold my beer.
It's not very often that we get news stories in IndyCar racing that truly shakes us to the core, makes us question our values, makes us question our very existence. I remember where I was when I heard the news that Luca Ghiotto was driving the Dale Coyne Racing entry at Barber Motorsports Park and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course. Who am I kidding? I just stole that bit from the F1 Rejects podcast. Anyway, um, all about it's funny. Roger Penske and his team had so much heat on them after Long Beach when it was discovered that Joseph Newgarden and Scott McLaughlin had illegally used push to pass at St. Petersburg. Their podiums, well, Newgarden's win was taken away. And then Newgarden had a very teary-eyed, almost teary-eyed press conference at Barber. And then Monday morning, I see the release in my inbox. David Malukas no longer has a drive. Oh boy. That's one way to get the heat off your team. The other way is winning. And Scott McLaughlin did just that at Barber Motorsports Park. He needed that badly, didn't he?
Oh, for sure. To come back from a DQ, which is the first time, if memory serves, IndyCar had DQ'd someone off the podium since Al Unser Jr. in, was it 1994?
95
95.
at Portland. I think it was like some like 2-inch ground clearance rule. But it was overturned on appeal after the season was over, but that didn't really make too much of a difference because Jacques Villeneuve still won the championship because Team Penske royally messed up that year's Indy 500. Spoiler alert, kids, please make sure that your setup pads are all calibrated and set up properly. But I digress. Newgarden lost his win. He still kept the point for pole because he didn't use push to pass in the qualifying session. But Scott McLaughlin had 0 points from that race. And after St. Pete, no, after Long Beach, he was 29th in points. And by winning at Barber, he went from 29th all the way to ninth. It's probably the largest single gain in championship standings
Huge
in
jump.
IndyCar history.
Well, and conversely, Newgarden is sitting at 16. He's credited with one top 10 on the season. He's got 48 points out of three races. Definitely not where that team and driver thought they would be. Uh, and he had a Sunday at Barber to forget. He was not a factor in the race at all, apart from being a storyline of having that that win negated, and then all the discussion in the paddock and in the media about whether or not people were buying his and Team Penske's explanation. I don't know. It's been a while since I've been in the paddock. It's been a few years since I've been a member of the media. You were there on site working. You've got the hard card credential, so you were at the press conference. You heard what he had to say in person. A lot of drivers think, a lot of team owners and team principals also think it's a bunch of hooey their explanation. I have a bit of a hard time believing that it was a misleft line of code given everything that Team Penske stands for in terms of attention to detail and the process and all that stuff. They talk, Penske perfect. You think, wow, they left a line of code from testing in August and it didn't get caught until Long Beach. Uh, the explanation seems a little far-fetched, but also if you're going to cheat and use something to your advantage to win, doing something that obvious that leaves an obvious data marker that could be found if someone were looking for it, like I don't know. I don't know where to fall, but that was a huge blow. Certainly gave us something to talk about after Long Beach. Apart from Scott Dixon's amazing, the Iceman doing what the Iceman does, saving fuel. And then, of course, Gavin Ward comes out and says, boy, I really wish we could see, their fuel flow numbers. It's like, maybe if McLaren focused more on their processes, uh, they wouldn't have three drivers in the back half of the top 20 or the bottom
Yeah,
half of the, bottom half of the field department.
they Aaron McLaren, and we'll get into everything that eventually happened with them in a bit, but the biggest thing with Joseph Newgarden was, especially with with the way that they circumvented the rules. IndyCar is a very data-driven championship. I know people will say, "Oh, it's a spec series, whatever." There is a lot of data available, not just to every single team, but to the general public as well. Um, for example, IndyCar has a results page that anybody can access, and you can see actually this box that I am able to check called section results. Every single lap of every single session has like 10 or 11 different microsectors, and everybody can see down to like the fourth decimal place every driver's microsector times on different parts of the track. People can see a lot of different things going on. This isn't anything where you can really hide, putting it bluntly. And Team Penske kind of told on themselves because ordinarily, teams are able to use push to pass during warm-up sessions, and at Long Beach, all three drivers were able to use it while there was a technical glitch on the IndyCar side, which was supposed to eliminate push to pass for everybody. But the IndyCar race control staff saw that these three cars from Team Penske all were able to use push to pass, and it was like, hello, something's going on here. Skipping ahead to Barber, though. I was in the room when Joseph Newgarden gave his press conference on Friday morning. Very early on Friday morning. I had to leave my hotel at 6:15 in the morning to get down there because I stayed at Huntsville the night before, because I drove down from Indianapolis the day before. Very, very emotional. He was almost in tears afterwards. I can understand why. You wouldn't be a normal human being if you didn't show some emotion, if your integrity was called into question. I think the th situation with Joseph was he and his family have sacrificed a lot to get him to this point in his career. He didn't want to have any of that tarnished because of this. Do I think Joseph was complicit in way back in late 23 saying, yeah, let's do this? Probably not. That to me is more of an engineering thing than a him thing, considering that him and McLaughlin and Power all pushed the button on a restart when you're like, oh, it's not supposed to be active. And then all of a sudden Joseph pushes it. Whoa, we're going for it here. But I digress. Um, but then they had the bullpen about 10 or 15 minutes later, after everybody was in the press conference room. They had the bullpen just at the backside of the media center, which nowadays at Barber is at the big school building, driving school building up on the hill. A lot of drivers, the term BS was used. Um, I actually asked Pato and Colton how often they read the rule book or if they have read the rule book. They both said they hadn't, but they didn't need to because they knew the rules. And it just seemed a little bit odd that this was the explanation that Joseph Newgarden gave to the assembled media. And I actually just I found the photograph from the Penske media site. I'm not sure if you have access to that, Kyle, but right before driver intros, Joe Skibinski, Skibby from IndyCar Photography, he took a
World-class
photograph of
photographer.
he took a photograph of the drivers before driver intros, and you can see that looks like Marcus
It's
Armstrong.
very, very telling.
You got Mark.
Newgarden's all by himself. Not a soul is talking to him now. You could say, he's locked in, he's focused. Um, but it also appears that none of his competitors are making an effort to include him. Now we don't see the before and the after of that.
Yeah,
But Newgarden's always, at least to me, and I, when I worked in IndyCar, we worked for directly for Honda Performance, HRC now. So at least on the IndyCar side, the Team Penske guys were kind of the rivals. Joseph was the New York Yankees, I guess, as it were. Now on the sports car side, we were Team Penske all the way, and the accurate prototypes. Yeah, racing makes for strange bedfellows. Um, and I always thought Joseph kind of played a little bit of that heel role in IndyCar. He was incredibly good. He got there on merit, not a guy who bought his ride, worked his way up, earned that Penske ride, and kind of relished that role of I'm this guy. I am the best young American open wheel talent in the world right now, and I'm going to go out and do that job. And to your point, you can get emotional when your integrity is called into question and everything you worked for uh, is put up there. But at the same time, push to pass has been around since the Champ Car era. This is not a new
Yep.
technology. Um, Even the casual fan at home probably knows when and where you can use push to pass. It's not as obvious as DRS in Formula One, where there are DRS zones and you have to be a certain you know distance and time delta to the car in front. But uh, obviously it chewed up a bunch of bandwidth and word count and tweets and blog posts and articles because that is huge news. When it's a driver like Joseph Newgarden, a team like Team Penske, all the cachet they bring to the sport and all the wins and everything they stand for, when they're DQ'd for cheating, it's gonna open some eyes and raise some eyebrows, and cast a bit of a pall over the Barber race. Um, and then Scotty Mack goes out and makes a huge statement in a race that was as entertaining as I've seen in quite some time. We had a little bit of everything.
Yeah, no kidding. It definitely cast a pall over the first part of the weekend, and then Scotty Mack comes out. He scores another pole position in his career. Joseph qualified eighth, so at least he got to the second round. Um, but it was a tough weekend for several other of the competitors as well. I mean, I look at Rinus VeeKay. He qualified last in the race. He was fastest after the second practice session, but they had an engine issue. He said he had no power after the first round of qualifying. I don't I think they made an engine change. I gotta check to see if their press release and mentioned that they had to do an engine change. But yeah, they had some issue. Renus ended up finishing 17th in the race. But yeah, you talk about entertaining. Yeah, there were four cautions in the race. It was a 90 lap race. I guess to kind of just get into it a little bit. The first caution started out very early in the race. Pato Award, he started fourth. He went off track like in the first couple of laps of the race. I think it was on like lap two, I think is when he went off track. Um, and he was trying to drive his little heart out, go through the field, and he had contact with Pietro Fittipaldi as they were going through. I want to say it was turns like 12 and 13.
The downhill before you make that right hander up over the access
Yes.
tunnel.
Yeah, that was like yeah, it's like 12 13 complex. It's like a quick left right. And Pietro, went across into the grass and the rear wing was dislodged. The car needed to get towed back to the pits, and Pato was given a penalty for avoidable contact. Not the first penalty for avoidable contact in the race, because VeeKay actually hit who was it? Kiffin Simpson, who got into Jack Harvey and I think Stingray Robb at the start. So not ideal from any of their perspectives. But this early caution opened up a strategic window. Pato, Linus Lundqvist, Santino Ferrucci, Theo Pourchaire, Harvey, VeeKay, Simpson, and Jack Harvey. No, not Jack Harvey. Luca Giotto. They all pitted underneath the first caution. This allowed the teams to go onto an alternate strategy, and you didn't get this level of um, analysis with the undercut. We know what that's for. This is where you get all your deeper analysis. That allowed the teams to go onto an alternate strategy, a two-stop strategy from there on out to try and do something different than the front runners. So then let's look at the front guys. Scott McLaughlin, Will Power, Christian Lundgaard. Those three drivers stopped between laps 24 and 28. They were on a two-stop strategy as well. Um, However, that changed a little bit later on in the race because you can't do this on a two-stop or on a three-stop strategy. A lot of drivers stopped on lap 30 or 31, and then the wheels fell off of the race. Well, at least they did for Alexander Rossi. So Rossi came out of the pits, and you've picked a fine time to leave me, loose wheel. The left rear tire on the number 7 Aaron McLaren car came off. That's two of the three cars for Aaron McLaren that just did not have a good time at Barber. Rossi doesn't like Barber anyway, even though he's actually had a couple of races where he's done pretty well there, but he did not need this.
No, for a guy who's trying to get his career back on track, and it feels like he's been trying to get his career back on track since 2019. Uh, that's not a good result. Certainly not what he expected moving over to Arrow McLaren a couple years ago. Certainly not what they expected headed into the season. But McLaren is they're an average team at best. When you're in a field with Team Penske and Ganassi, you've got 7 cars between those two teams.
8.
Yeah, 8. Yeah, Ganassi's got 5 cars. 6 of those are a threat to win every week. I think Linus Lundqvist is certainly going to be up there. Marcus Armstrong is fast. Kiffin Simpson is a rookie, so it's going to take him some time to get up to speed, but he's absolutely got the tools to do it. But
Yes.
between Palou and Dixon, you've got 2 guys every week who you can't count out. I mean, there was a time early in the race where Dixon was making his way up through the field. He was setting fast laps, and it was like, okay, at the end of the race, he's going to factor into this conversation. He and Graham Rahal have a little bit of an issue going into turn 5 there, and Dixon ends up where did he finish? 15th. So he recovered to finish 15th. Was the
That time
points
free
leader?
had some an off-track excursion with Graham Rahal. Did he have another spin as well in the wrong race? I don't know because he had an issue with Rahal in the hairpin early in the race. But then he also had to pit for fuel. I remember him pitting for fuel like on lap 64 or 65 in the race. And I thought that is really odd that they're making him stop because usually he's the fuel saving master. That I just didn't understand that.
I'm not sure. And watching from home, he wasn't a factor really in the outcome of the race. So the broadcast didn't pay a whole bunch of attention to him after that off track, and he fell so far down the running order because there were a bunch of other intriguing storylines. Santino Ferrucci led 14 laps on Sunday. That AJ Foyt 14 had a ton of pace.
Finished
I think
seventh
if
on pace alone, which I hate to be like this, but AJ Foyt Racing has had very, very limited success over the last several years in IndyCar racing. This was a banner day for them. Now, there are a lot of things you could say about Santino, positive, negative, otherwise. If we're being just strictly analytical here, this was a very good day for that team. We can't take that away from them. This was the kind of day that you definitely hang your hat on. I didn't see AJ at the track, but if you were, I know you would have gotten some great barbecue afterwards. It You had to hand it to them. They did a great job.
Yeah,
Since despite the first lap or first turn heroics on like lap, I think was it 2 or 3 when he got elbows out with Colton Herta. Hey, he actually drove really well to get that car into 7th place. Now, granted, they do have a technical alliance with Team
Penske.
Penske, but still, the fact of the matter is getting a top 10 at a place like Barber that is so difficult to master is incredible. Now we did mention about the Alexander Rossi caution. I feel we have to bring this up. During that caution on lap 46, we had Christian Lundgaard, Will Power, Scott McLaughlin, Christian Rasmussen, Jack Harvey, Tom Blomqvist, and Augustine Canapino all stopping underneath that caution to do fuel and tires as well. This was now their strategy play. They could make it officially on one more stop from there to the end of the race. Um, Now we talk about that. They had all stopped between laps 24 and like 30 around that area. Now we go back green, and then about 6 or 7 laps later, no, 8 laps later, we have another full course yellow. Stingray Rob, I guess he was distracted by something. We'll get back to that. He went off track at turn one, and the car got buried in the tires at the exit of the sand trap. He couldn't get that car out of there. No one was without a winch, and so they called a full course yellow. However, about 30 seconds before he went off track, um, someone made a guest appearance at this race. Now, for those of you that have never been to Barber Motorsports Park, um, the track has a lot of oddities. Humongous ant sculptures with a Coca-Cola bottle, a big spider outside of turn six, hence the corner being called Charlotte's Web. Different things being etched into the pavement, like a wrench. There was a mannequin hanging from the bridge that went across the track right before turn eight. And then we saw the clip.
Georgina falls from the rafters. In the words of Darrell Waltrip, have you ever? Nope,
One time.
haven't seen that one before. I've seen banners on track. I've seen P2 cars hit those those signs along the edge of the track and carry those around.
Marketing.
Like yeah, a lot of weird. I've never seen a mannequin fall from a crossover bridge. Uh, didn't bring out a yellow.
It was
You
off
know,
track.
it was off track. It was off track, and that was got again in a race that had a little bit of everything. That was it. It led to some uh, very memeable material. A lot of people had fun with that.
So
I think
this is how we get attention to IndyCar.
yeah, Georgina is a leading candidate to fill that seat in the six car that's been vacated now that Malukas is looking for his next opportunity.
Did IndyCar actually hire a VP of marketing? No. Anyway, well, it made Sports Center. IndyCar
Yeah,
made Sports Center with that, and the other time they make Sports Center is if there's like a either a massive accident or the Indy 500.
DB 500.
They
Yep.
made Sports Center. This is you can't buy that kind of publicity. Although I'm pretty sure they're gonna have another mannequin go up there. Nothing's gonna stop them now. We know that. Don't sue us, whoever is doing the rights. Anyway, uh, so anyway, underneath that yellow, lap 56, a lot of other drivers pitted, about a dozen or so drivers pitted. I'm not going to go into all of them because there's a lot, but at least we can tell you Scott Dixon, uh, Alex Pillow, Marcus Armstrong pitted, as well as Colton Herta, Marcus Ericsson, Joseph Newgarden, and the first driver on that bunch, Felix Rosenquist. So lap 56, they pit. The race goes green at the end of lap 59. And now we have two different strategies working here. About 8 or 9 drivers have to stop one more time. They cannot make it to the end of the race. But there are a lot of drivers that stopped that can make it. But there were some drivers that stopped that couldn't. I think I might have mentioned it earlier. Scott Dixon, he made a pit stop on lap 65.
Which
And
isn't in the official scoring data. He's credited with just 2 stops.
I say because
Um,
like yeah, because okay, so he stopped on lap 56. I say I have the pit stop sequence right here. He finished. No, he's got 3 stops right there. Green on lap 30, yellow on lap 56, green on lap 65. But on 65, he only stopped for fuel. He did not change tires in that stop. But like when we look at the data right here, okay, so he stopped on lap 56. He had to make a pit stop again. I don't know why. I don't know what happened there. Pato Award, same thing, 1 lap later. Tom Blomqvist. Um, he stopped on the previous caution, but that's when he made his final stop. I guess they back timed it. Newgarden stopped again, um, the same lap that Pato and yeah. So it's just one of those deals where like a few drivers that stopped underneath the lap 56 caution, like they had to stop again. And that was really confusing to me. I couldn't understand that. But the chase was on because you had five or six drivers that had to push like crazy to build up enough of a gap to where they could make their final pit stops and still come out ahead of the drivers that had to fuel save and not have to go to pit road again. The pit road delta at Barber is around 27 to 28 seconds. And in there was a 15 lap gap there from lap 60 to lap 75 where drivers had to push like crazy to build that gap up. There were several laps where Scott McLaughlin was going 2 to 3 seconds a lap faster than Alex Palou, and they built up enough of a gap. And funny enough, I got the lap chart right here. Scott McLaughlin, Will Power, Christian Lundgaard, Christian Rasmussen, um, Linus Lundqvist, and Augustine Canapino all set their fastest laps of the race right before their final pit stops, which, let's face it, if you're a driver, you want to get told to push, that's the best way to do it. They all make their final pit stops, and coming out of the pits, Scott McLaughlin still has the lead. Will Power goes out in second. Palou is still third. However, unfortunately for Palou, he would lose third place to Linus Lundqvist on lap 79, and Linus would remain in that position for the rest of the race. Palou would end up being fourth until lap 89 when Felix Rosenqvist got by him, and then Palou ended up finishing fifth. Now, it wasn't exactly a smooth ride to the finish because Christian Rasmussen spun in, I believe it was turn 14 or 15. I think it was 14 actually. He was coming across a right-hander and just lost control for whatever reason. I don't know how or why, but he just lost control, spun, stalled the car, and IndyCar had to call for a full course yellow to go get him. It was a very quick full course yellow. I didn't even think they opened the pits up, but it was a
They
case
didn't.
of, yeah, get him started, get him going, pace car go in and let the drivers race. And they did. They got everybody out and they ran for another 3 laps. And that's how Rosenqvist got by Palou. Now, there was one other thing that we should bring up. We mentioned earlier that it was not a good race for Arrow McLaren across all three of their cars. We haven't talked a lot about Theo Pourchaire. He was actually doing okay. He was having a very anonymous race. He was in the low teens, 18th, 19th, around that area. So no one really talked about him all that much. I don't think he had any off-track excursions to my memory. He was just okay. He was doing
He was
okay.
he was minding his own business, enjoying
Exactly.
his very first IndyCar start. And out of
At
nowhere,
Barber.
here comes the 5 car, who's was missing a few feathers at that point, uh, and torpedoed him in turn 5. Uh, Pato pushing, I guess, with a couple laps left, no time left on the clock, trying to get all he can, and did the one thing in racing you don't want to do, which is wreck your teammate.
It, I looked at the video of the last lap incident. Someone shared it on Twitter, and if Pato could have been any further back from Theo when he braked for the corner to try and set his move up, he would have been in Mississippi. Um, there was no way he was gonna be able to make that work. He had no shot. He truly had no shot at that. Um, there was someone that replied to me on Twitter that said, yeah, Theo changed lines mid-corner to try and cut Pato off, and still Pato came from so far back that that move was just not on. It
No,
was
I don't
not
think
on.
Porsche had no idea he was there.
No, and Share, putting it bluntly, on that straightaway beforehand, he sees how far back Pato is. He shouldn't expect Pato to be there on the last lap of the race, given, like I said, how far back it was. Like I have the clip right here in front of me. Yeah, he was way, way far back. That move was just not on. IndyCar penalized Pato for the contact. They penalized him one position. So it's really interesting where if you look at the official box score of the race, you have Augustine Canapino in 20th, Luca Ghiotto 21st, both on 90 laps. Theo Porcher in 22nd place, 89 laps. 23rd place, Pato Award, 90 laps complete. Um, yeah, it which let's face it, it was a penalty that needed to be assessed.
Yeah.
That was not on it was not it it was a low percentage move, and Aaron McLaren, their cars finished 22nd, 23rd, 25th, with Pourchaire leading Pato, leading Rossi. Not a good day for the team.
One car lap down, one car 23rd, and one car 30 laps down after not getting a tire and wheel put on all the way. Again, forgettable outing for Arrow McLaren. Again, then ended up in the news the very next day, letting David Malukas go. Unfortunate situation all the way around there. Guy never has a chance to even show what he can do in really good equipment.
And
And
it's bad on every single metric. And it's not one of those situations where like one person's in the right, one person's in the wrong. Everybody loses in this situation. For Malukas, he's training, he's trying to increase his physical strength, endurance, all that, do more cardio in the off season, mountain biking, injures himself. He might have underplayed how serious his injury was. I don't know. I can't confirm that, but he was expected to be out 6 weeks. It ended up being longer than that. He was actually still working on the car after the race. He was actually cleaning up the sixth car after the race was over, but he didn't really have the chance to show what he could do. You look at back at Renus VK when he had his incident, he now no longer trains on a movable bike. He only does bike training on an interval bike in the gym for that reason,
mhm.
and also because he broke his collarbone a few years ago, and Oliver Askew subbed for him at Road America. And then you look at Aaron McLaren's side. This is not good from their perspective because you need to be able to say that you have someone that's dedicated to this seat for these races. You can plan it out. You can get the driver in the sim, working on your pre-event prep. Well, if it's prep, it's already pre. Anyway, I digress. You need to have someone that's there, dedicated to what you're going to be doing, not doing these piecemeal, bit by bit by bit. We're going to do this driver here, which they could still do. We could easily have Callum Ilott doing the Indy 500, Theo Porcher in for the Indy GP. Heck, we could even, Sage Karam even tweeted after the race, hey, big plans announcement coming. He may even be in the sixth car for all we know. Who knows? Um, that's another thing I wanted to bring up as well. It's funny with how the WEC schedule works and how the Super Formula Series works because Theo drives in Super Formula full time, Callum drives in WEC full time. There's like 3 conflicts with WEC and 4 conflicts with Super Formula, but WEC and Super Formula don't actually have a conflict with each other. So in theory, Aaron McLaren could just split the drive up between Theo Pourchaire and Callum Ilott for the rest of the season. Now, who do you want on an oval? I would probably put Callum in. I don't have the schedule in front of me, so I don't know if there's an oval conflict. But if you need to get Theo some oval experience, the last ovals on the schedule are not a bad place to do it. Um, I do think we'll see Malukas back in an IndyCar before the end of the year. Dale Coyne Racing might still have a few open races available, but this gives David the chance to strictly focus on recovery and just make sure that he is at the best tip-top shape before he tries to go back to the IndyCar world. Also, Linus Lundqvist on the podium in third, never once finished off the podium in a race at Barber, either in Formula Regional Americas or Indy Next. Great job by him.
Absolutely. Trying to wrap things up here before we run out of time on the free Zoom recording. Couple things to note. Not the first time Arrow McLaren has done someone dirty contract-wise who's been injured. Oliver Askew, come on down. At the end of the day, though, racing is a business.
Yes.
But a team that has a track record of doing that certainly makes you raise an eyebrow when they do, especially when they haven't had results recently to back it up, and they have some team leaders who have been very outspoken in their criticism
But they won St. Pete.
They technically speaking, they did, yes. Uh, anyway, news out earlier this week. We may only have 34 entries in the Indy 500. It is May 1st, so happy month of May to all of you who celebrate the high holy month of speed. Racer put out an article yesterday, Bill Abel, team principal and owner of Abel Motorsports, saying they may not have an Indy 500 entry this year. They're waiting for their driver, R.C. Enerson, to get a funding package together, but they are coming down to the wire to make that decision. So 35, 34 cars, somebody's not going to make the field of 33. Remains to be seen who that will be this year. Qualifying always fun to watch for sure. The Indy GP coming up. Don't have an entry list yet. There's still a couple seats. The 6 car, obviously, curious who's going to be in that. I'm sure Dale Coyne Racing still has driver TBD listed on their entry form. So yeah, we've big month coming up. Very excited to see those cars back on track at Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
I'm looking forward to it. Just no more rain, no rain. I'm just waving my arm at the clouds here. Just no rain. Unless you want to rain during the road course race, in which case we get a little bit of chaos in our world every now and then. But we're finally to practice. We don't need it. Although if you're gonna rain hard and rain early so that I don't have to go out to the track. That was the one win that I had, I think it was last year, where it rained hard enough on opening day that I never even left my apartment because it's a 40-minute drive to the speedway, and they called it right before I was getting ready to leave. But yeah, actually for Dale Coyne, I think they're going to have Jack Harvey in the 18 and Giotto in the 51. They did announce him for the Indy GP, but I'm looking forward to seeing what Catherine Legg's going to do in the 51 for that seat during the 500. It's going to be interesting for qualifying. We're almost out of time. So, yeah, we're going to get ready to chop this bad boy up and send it on out. Kyle, lead us away.
That's it. Thanks for watching the inaugural edition of the Overcut. We will talk with you after the Indy GP.